Hello and welcome to WNHH FM's Dateline New Haven. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make New Haven tick. The Reverend Stephen Cousin makes New Haven tick. Reverend Cousin is the pastor of Bethel AME Church, one of New Haven's leading congregations, and he finds time to sit on some of our important civic decision-making boards. He's emerged as a leading voice for justice in our city. Welcome, Reverend Cousin. It's great to have you back.
Always so glad to be back, and I tell you, to pitch hit for the mayor for Mayor Monday is a tremendous honor for me. So thank you for having me on your show.
All right, we got Rev Monday. We got Mayor Tony Harp is in New York at a Bloomberg conference. We're going to find out next week, hopefully, what she learned. And thanks to Yellow Haven Hospital for providing support for today's program. So, Reverend Cousin, it's great to have you back in the studio. What's new at Bethel down on Gough Street?
Bethel's still trying to, always with the mission, trying to save souls, trying to get people to be more involved actively in the church, and really just trying to serve the needs of the community, whatever is look as a gap or looking as a shortfall. The Bethel Church is always trying to actually make up that deficit, so to speak, whatever way that we can.
What do you see as the biggest issue in the minds of your congregations these days? It doesn't have to be political. Like, what's going on in folks' lives?
Really, Paul, I think for more spiritual growth, especially with things that are happening in our community and the country, really just trying to develop a stronger faith, to maintain, not only just to survive, but to thrive in these type of times.
Mm-hmm. Can you think of a day recently at the church that was special to you, that said, this is why I'm ministering to a major church in New Haven and spending all my days doing that?
One of the things that I enjoy is not just necessarily on Sunday mornings, but it's the work that we do Monday through Saturday. So we actually have a camp run by a young man named Diari that sponsors a camp called Fearless Academy. And this young man had nowhere to go, had no space available, very limited financial resources. And he came to the church looking for help. And we open up our doors. We're not even charging this young man for his camp, because at the end of the day, these kids have nowhere else to go. There are plenty of hundreds of camps in the city, but unfortunately, there are some kids who still get left out. And so
we're talking summer, right?
Yes, sir.
So Monday through Friday, where is this camp at the church? Is it
It's at the church. It's downstairs in the fellowship hall. Between the hours, we open up at 7:30, and they end their day like around 3:30.
Well, what do they do all day?
Activities, trips, more just trying to build up social development skills, emotional development. Just really just various things that I guess a summer camp would do.
Is it fun? The kids every
they seem to enjoy it. We have like at least 20 kids that are there.
All right.
So they seem to enjoy it, and they love, especially the parents, they love it seeing it at a church. It makes them feel safe. So we actually enjoy providing that service.
All right. And you've also opened up your, I guess it's on hold. You're opening up the Community Outreach Center to be a youth center called The Escape, and also a teen homeless shelter is going to be in that.
Yes,
We've
sir.
heard that there are a lot of teens who couch surf or double up and don't really have homes right now. What's the status on that? I know that was delayed.
That status is still ongoing. I know that I spoke with the mayor, I spoke with the city, and we are still committed, and they are still committed in doing the project. So I'm looking forward to developing that partnership. I know it's still ongoing. I want to thank the Board of Alders for recently approving the youth services budget in terms of actually extending the operating cost of the project. But I believe this project is so necessary for our city that it's not even about the money, but I'm looking at the impact that this program can actually bring to our city, just the morale, having children feel like they have a place to go that they could call their own. That's why we invest in this. That's why I do what I do, because for those who don't have a voice, who can't always show up at meetings, at least I can be their representative and say, this is what they're looking for. So if this is what I can offer, I'm going to fight my hardest to do so.
Do you find how many young kids or teens come to church on Sunday?
No, not at all. There is so much going on in their personal lives that, unfortunately, the stigma, especially around the Black church, is that you have to have everything together. where you need to have the best job or be in the best
So there's a
relationship.
status sense in it.
It's status, yes. And for those on the outside, we had a young man on Gulf Street Park, one of our members after church, walked across the street and he
Mm.
would like to know more about the church. And he said, I would love to join or I love to go, but I smoke marijuana. And I don't want people looking at me in a negative way if I were to come inside your church. And for me,
How
the
would they know he smokes marijuana?
because he said it. And for us, I know what the smell's like.
Oh, he smells like he's smoking it when he's coming to church.
Yes, sir. But at the end of the day,
I
that's
don't
what
like
we're
I
supposed
don't
to
like the
minister to.
smell. I didn't mind it when I was a kid, but
Well, at the end of the day,
kind of skunky.
they said the house, like the church is for the lost, and like the church is for those who are uncurably sick. And so those are the ones we need to minister to. If they're not willing, or we're not willing to accept those who come in, what is the church good for?
So what did you tell the kid?
He is more than welcome anytime, no matter. We always say, come as you are. And that means if you have no job, you don't have the best clothes, you're not in the best situations, what have you, come as you are. It's not our job to clean you up. Our job is to introduce you to Jesus. And Jesus is the one that can clean you up. That's our belief.
So interesting. You make a great observation here, Reverend Cousin, about how our sanctuaries, our congregations are places where we definitely believe and we're involved. We want everyone to come. And yet it probably can be intimidating because people get dressed up in some cases or they're notable people. They look all successful. It's interesting to hear what that young man had to say, the way it can be intimidating.
And that's why we're losing so many of our millennials.
So how do you do it? How do you overcome that besides telling that guy we want you here?
You keep talking it, you keep preaching it, you keep walking it.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I know my church, much to their disappointment, so to speak, or for lack of a better term, I don't wear robes every Sunday. If I could, I'll wear jeans and a t-shirt every Sunday if I could, because I want to let the people on the outside know that I can be relatable.
You want to be approachable.
I want to be approachable. That's really the sense.
And do some people want to wear robes because they want their leader to sort of be special, to make them feel more special?
It's more. It's really.
Like I remember when Mayor Daniels, it was important when he was the first African American mayor in town, was so important black community that he had a fancy city car to drive around. I remember that struck me, that they kind of saw themselves in him, sort of.
Well, unfortunately, especially for the black church, where Monday through Saturday we were deemed as nothing, we were seen as inferior or less than. And Sunday was the only day we can actually feel like somebody, where we actually wear our best clothes. And because that was the only day that reserved for us. In this day and age, you have those who wear suits Monday through Saturday in this professional world. And so Sunday, they do like to come dressed down. But we're still going against that narrative that Sunday morning, you have to be looking your best. And unfortunately, I believe, it's just my opinion, it hurts us more than it helps us.
That's so interesting. Karen Dro's joined. Thanks for Karen for listening in. You're listening to Dateline New Haven with Reverend Stephen Cousin of Bethel AME Church. He's an important force in New Haven spiritually, in the religious community, and in the civic realm. Do you do any kind of Bible study during the week at Bethel?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Every Wednesday evening.
Why is it always Wednesday? I always noticed. Is it because of midweek after you've had church on Sunday?
And we, for the black church, we call it a tune-up.
Okay.
You may feel empty midway through the point. So the Bible study is supposed to rejuvenate you till you get to Sunday morning.
Great. And what was most recently the topic of Bible study?
We were actually looking at really how to develop your faith. And so we looked at one of our favorite stories, Daniel in the Lion's Den. And it was really what led up to that point where his faith was tested, regarding by him, signing an edict not to pray to his God. If he were to pray to his God, he would get thrown in the den. But in spite of that, he still prayed to his God, the God that saw him through, the God that saw him through Babylon. That was his source of his strength, and he was not going to compromise that, regardless of what the edict may have said otherwise. And that's really, how do you show your faith in trying times? And too many times people like to hide behind certain things and don't let their faith or their convictions show. And at too many times, when you truly believe in something, you're going to get knocked down. You're going to lose something. And I think right now, especially for our generation, we have been too comfortable in saying that it's not that important because I don't want to risk what I have. But that's what faith is. Faith is taking a risk. If you're not willing to take a risk, then you might as well say you have no faith at all.
And I noticed you've been speaking up in town as well lately. There was a story we had in the Independent where you went to the Board of Education, which I guess is the maybe in addition to the police, would you agree is the line department that most impacts people in our community, everyday people, that kids
Yes.
go to school. And we've had a lot of political turmoil in the Board of Education. And you stood up, Reverend Cousin. You said, we're living in some difficult times across the country in the school district. They can be overcome, but we have to be on the same page. We have to come together, put our differences aside, do what's best for residents, what's best for our children. What motivated you to stand up and say that?
Too many times we believe that one side has to be right. And I think that more divides us than it does unite us. At the end of the day, how are you able to put your differences aside and actually have one common goal? Now, if we're talking about this is for the kids, we're making the best decisions for the kids, then no matter what your personal agendas are, if your true agenda is about the kids, then you're able to come together to work things out. And this deficit, $20 million, as what I've been told,
For the school deficit,
for
yeah.
the school deficit, can it be overcome? Yes, but it's going to take some real ingenuity, and people going to have to lay their cards out on the table. They cannot hold anything back in terms of what type of gains they may receive or who's going to get what. At the end of the day, if it's about these kids, you should not matter. All that should matter are these kids.
And what do you see happening? I mean, it's unbelievable to me how first we had a couple of years in which the school board was stymied because you had two factions. There was a newly elected school board, and they just focused on getting rid of a school superintendent. They finally got rid of him. It cost a lot of money. They waited a whole year waiting for a new one. Now we got a new one that the majority of the Board of Education brought in. Now they're fighting with her pretty tough, a few months in, and some people say they're undercutting her. Some say they're giving her needed oversight, but they're insulting her in public. Is that what motivated you there? I mean, what do you think's going on?
Well, I think we have to understand, and I know that sometimes we could be prisoners of the time where let's face reality. She's on her job. This is her fourth month
That's
on
Superintendent Carol Burks.
Superintendent Dr. Burks. This is her fourth month on the job. She came on March 19th amidst controversy and turmoil. And her first day on her job, she was told to reduce a $20 million deficit by the beginning of this upcoming school year. That is not an easy task, especially for somebody who is just coming in, learning our system. She's already behind the eight ball. And for her to try to make decisions, I think that number one, we have to allow leeway for her to make the decisions that's best for the children. But I also believe that both sides of the table, the Board of Ed and Dr. Burks, have to develop stronger communication. Be very explicit about what we're trying to do, how we're going to accomplish these goals. And I believe that there's always going to be an ebb and flow, a give and take in this relationship. But at the end of the day, it goes back to the kids. But once again, this is the fourth month. This isn't somebody who has been in our system for 3 years, 4 years. There's somebody who is really 4 months, 120 days on the job. How much can she really get done without our support? And that's what I'm saying. If we really fought like crazy to bring her here, given everything that you just said, I think that she's worth the risk and letting see this play out to see where this goes.
Might the argument be that they felt they had to intervene? I mean, I'd never seen before a press conference where Board of Ed criticized superintendent without her there. Do you think they felt like, she's going down the wrong road, way she handed out layoff notices and we better rein her in and tell her? And then she did proven a suspension for a kid and they overruled that.
It can be seen as that. And I think that, you try to keep the reins because for the fact that she is new. But, for these simple things. You already closed down what, 3 schools or 2 schools, and you're merging one alternative school. You did that. Traditionally, it takes 15 to 18 months to close a school, and she closed Creed in less than 3 months. That's phenomenal. I think the problem is we made it look too easy. But knowing that, okay, we're able to save $6 million just by closing these schools, how do we make up the rest of the deficit? That's when I believe she attacked the part timers. And really, with the part timers, every year is supposed to be practice. You're supposed to receive a letter saying that your contract has expired and you're up for renewal. But from what I've been told, that some of these part time workers did not have any job descriptions.
Mm.
So, okay, when you ask what is it that you do, is there a job description, and that person can't provide you that job, then okay, why are you on the books? And I think it's interesting. We actually sent out 1,100 letters. 700 of them were actually in the system. It lets me know that there's not enough talking. What we have known about the 700 people actually in the system had not the 1,100 letters went out. And that's what I always ask. Well, how are we getting our information?
Mm-hmm.
And so I say all of that is, at the end of the day, you just can't close this deficit on closing schools. You're going to have to close the deficit by actually possibly laying off part-time workers. But I also understand the mayor's perspective, where these part-time workers are primarily New Haven residents. They actually attribute to the local economy. We can't afford to lose them because we lose revenue for our city. So it's a very hard thing, but I think people are not really understanding the gravity of the situation. It's hard to cut 10% of any budget. It's virtually impossible without somebody going to be upset, or somebody is going to be, may end up losing a job. But at the end of the day, it's $20 million, but we didn't get over here overnight. This was time and time again. I look at it as, you actually you go out to a bar, and I know it's weird saying this from a pastor, but you go to the bar, you keep saying, put it on my tab, put it on my tab, put it on my tab. At the end of the day, the bartender is going to call that tab in. Now you don't have any money to pay it, but you've been kicking the can down the road for so long, but now it's time for us. We got to pay up, and sacrifices have to be made. But this isn't to happen under her watch. We got to go back 20, 30 years to get to this point.
And how do you think she's doing overall?
I think she's doing a phenomenal job. I mean, at the end of the day, she hasn't been in for a full year. But I think with the transition team that she put together for the first time since I've been here, you had those all across the nation, and especially within the community, come together to talk about various issues. What she does every Monday for the Board of Education, she actually highlights a student regarding their accomplishments. I remember Wilbur Cross came in for culinary. There was a young man from Easums who scored a perfect score, I think 3 in the world in AP chemistry. And so she's highlighting that. She's also brought in the Spanish interpreter for those who, are bilingual or English is not their first language. There is now an interpreter at the Board of Ed meetings. And I think for the board's perspective, she actually produced them financial figures for the budget for the school district, which I know they have yet to see. They've been asking for one board member in particular. Now they received it in her second week. And also, when she first got here, not even a full week, she actually had less than 5 days to apply for a $900,000 state grant that's bonded. And she got here, and successfully within the week, she secured that grant.
What was that for?
That was for, really, from to my knowledge, for the school district. I don't know exactly what the caveat is or the stipulations, but there was a $900,000 grant that she received in state bonding for education.
Hmm. So you've been following the school board closely. You're on enough other boards. You run a church. Do you go to the meetings in general? Or?
I try to attend every meeting. Only thing I do not make is the financial meetings. But every time there's a
I heard those aren't necessarily, you might not want to sit through those. You have a
no,
reporter there, they're interesting.
it's like unless I really have to or feel like I
But
need
why do you
to.
go to the board meetings?
My children are in the school system.
Oh, yeah, where do they go?
My son who is 4, about to be 5 in September. He attends Davis Street, and I have a 9-month-old son in a couple of days that hopefully will be attending Davis Street. You know when his time comes.
They have pre-K?
Yes, sir. Pre-K 3, pre-K 4, and I love it because thankfully for this city, the one thing I love, pre-K is free. So I love that. So yes, my children will be attending Davis, and I love it because I live in Westfield, so I live right around the corner from Davis. So it works out great for me and my wife.
And how's the pre-K program there?
I love it. My son, you may call me cheap, most people do. I just can't do babysitters. So my wife was actually stayed at home while working, taking care of our son, and we could not wait till he reached the age of 3, so we could send him to pre-K. But it did so much for his emotional and social development, just to be around kids his own age. We really truly enjoyed his teachers. He still has a great relationship with them, and we're looking forward to see what kindergarten brings him.
All right. And we're looking forward to reminding you that you listen to Dateline New Haven on WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio. We're lucky to have the Reverend Stephen Cousin with us today from Bethel AME Church and a bunch of city civic boards he sits on, including the fire department. So you've been on the Board of Fire Commissioners a couple of years now, right?
Yeah, I would say it'd be probably 2 years in November.
How long you been in town?
5.
Okay. Goes fast.
Yes, it does.
But you were like
I'm
right
losing
in-
my hair because of it.
So how are things going in the fire commission? What are the big issues there? One issue, you had a lot of promotion recently of new firefighters, the cadets, and people to higher ranks. How's Chief Alston doing with that, and how are they going to get overtime under control?
Well, I would tell you, you may be asking the wrong person about this because I'm a huge fan of Chief Alston. Everything
I want to make you the wrong person.
everything he wanted to do for the city, he has done. From my understanding, before he was actually brought on, there were like 7 top vacancies within the fire department. We talked about recruitment, we talked about retention, and under his leadership, the morale is high because promotions are going through. And because promotions are happening, we actually have the most diverse class 61, that is over 80% New Haven residents. And I'm going to say about 75, 77% minority, women, person of color, black, Hispanic. That has never happened before in our history. And I think he ought to be commended for that, where we actually just had a class of 40 go through. We're looking at doing more hiring, another class going through hopefully sometime later on this year. But I think for how he knows the game and how he knows the system, and what I love about these new classes, you have to be trained in both fire and as a para, which hasn't been done before. And I know there was a big controversy a few years ago about putting paramedic trucks in firehouses. And that actually people have right for a cause for concern for that. But if you look at our overall call log, over 80% of the calls that we receive are medical. And you have these big apparatuses going out to these calls. But at the end of the day, we still want to maintain services where we want to make sure we hit every house within 4 minutes. I do believe that's our range, but also being able to serve the needs of our community. And I believe he's actually have a very good balance. How do you bring down overtime? We're still looking at that. At the end of the day, we still have to look at sick time and leave time. And unfortunately, not necessarily unfortunately, you got to do what you got to do. I understand it. I respect it. But when there's a promotion up and it's testing, that's where you see most people taking time off because they need to study. And because they're taking the time to study and they deserve their promotions. But you still have to have those slots filled up. That's what drives up overtime. And so the more people that we actually have, we're able to cover shifts. But for the most part, That's how you're going to bring it down, in my opinion.
There's been a lot of talk over the years, Reverend Cousin, about whether we need as many firehouses. You talked about 4 minutes to get to a house, and whether we should be combining paramedics and firefighters to bring down those costs. I've seen people kind of change their minds on it when they study it. Where are you on those two big issues?
You know, when you look at how the fire service is now, my concern has always been you don't realize you need something till you need it. And I know, yes, we put a lot of emphasis on the medical side, rightfully so. But there were a couple of severe fires we just had, you know, this past year. And I'm thinking, what if we didn't have the resources to combat those
I
fires?
guess the question is, would we still have the resources if we changed union staffing rules and had one less firehouse?
That is going to be a battle. Could you do it? Yes, I believe so. If you're still able to hit the 4 minute mark, I still believe you're able to do it. Remember, Whitney was down for a little bit, and they actually had to go to different firehouses, still hitting the 4 minute mark. Now I believe they're out in back of a trailer of Whitney Station, but for a time it was manageable. I think you really have to look at what the MOU stands for, what the contract stands for. But can it be done? Yes. Impossible? No. Difficult? Yes.
So that's our marching orders for the fire department. You know, you spend all this time on boards and commissions at your church, on your own, going to meetings just to see what's going on in the community. How do you see that in your role as pastor? Why is it? Do you feel that there's a connection between a pastor for a large congregation and sitting on a pension board?
Yes. At the end of the day, what happens in the city affects my church. It affects my members sitting inside my church. And so I would like to be a voice for them as well, because they can't attend everything. You know, unfortunately, people assume that the pastor should just preach on Sunday morning, do a Bible study, and they do nothing else throughout the week. And this is my civic duty to actually bring back information to make my congregation aware and informed.
Speak for them, right? When you're
Yes, sir. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what a pastor is supposed to be. We're supposed to be the quote unquote voice of reason, or coming from it from a morality perspective. And it's my job to actually know. And I have to give credit to my mother. You know, when I was in high school, college, I always wanted to watch music videos. She would come inside the house and she'd say, turn on the news. And I'm always saying, for what? And she said, I'd rather be informed than entertained.
Hmm.
And that never stuck with me till I actually got in this position where it has to be my job to know what's going on so I can actually be a better pastor, a better preacher, and a better teacher. So I think you can't separate the two. I think it's all in one.
Pastor is part of the word term pastoral care. I would assume that in addition to Wednesday Bible study and Sunday church, you do a lot of pastoral care. Do people come to the pastor still when they have crises in their lives or when they need advice?
They still do. At the end of the day, people still want to hear from their pastor, whatever situation they're going through or what situation they find themselves in. They would still like to hear a word from their pastor. I'm actually praying for one of my members now who was just recovering from, did a double knee replacement surgery,
The
and
biggie.
and before I went to a conference, or before I went to a meeting, I made sure I went by the hospital to have prayer with him and to check up on him. And so I was praying for him, making sure that he was okay. There was
You know, those daily, we call it Refuah Shlema for complete recovery. We have daily Jewish tradition. We do daily prayers. And we have our list of people everybody says. So some people believe that there's some kind of universal consciousness. There's some kind of internet of the spirit that if you're praying for someone, it actually helps them heal. Other people think just having a community care about you is an important part. Some people think that kind of daily prayer is for the person who's praying to remember people who need their help and remind them. Any thoughts on that?
you know, my wife always says I always share this story. And you may not know this, but my senior year of high school, I was diagnosed with cancer,
Oh my goodness. What kind?
Hodgkin's.
Wow.
And they performed a biopsy because I had swollen lymph nodes in my neck. And but they were 90% sure I had Hodgkin's disease. And my grandmother, who was at a conference in Canada, when she heard the news, she told that conference and the missionaries in that conference, we need to stop what we're doing and pray for my grandson right now. And those women prayed. A week later, the results came back benign.
Hmm.
They had no idea what happened. They're proclaiming it a miracle. And I like to believe it was those women in Canada, whom I never met, was praying for me. So prayer changes you, prayer changes things, and prayer can change the one I believe that you're praying for.
It's a great story, Reverend Cousin.
Thank you. I
I'm,
have a few in my bag every now and then.
I'm glad they came back benign.
Yeah, I'm so glad too.
We're visiting with Reverend Stephen Cousin on Dateline New Haven and WNHH FM. Reverend Cousin, you also sit on another body that you wouldn't normally think of seeing a pastor on, the Police and Firemen's Pension Fund, which is actually a big deal, especially now because we've been short. We've dropped a lot in how we fund that pension fund. We've gone from 60.6% funded to 43.2% funded in just 8 years. Why do you think that's happening, and what do you think the solution is?
I'm glad you actually brought up that question. And I actually just started serving on the board, I want to say the beginning of this year. And from when I came on, it was at 40% funded. I think what you see now is it really has a lot to do with the ARC payments that contributions by the city put into inside the program. And unfortunately, right now, you always have rising medical benefits that go with that, and also connected disability services.
So do you mean when the city has to pay more for that other stuff, they can't put enough in the pension?
I believe so. That's just my personal. I could be in trouble for saying that, but that's what I believe. It's not like you have this set number because the numbers change every year. And how we sit on the board right now, we have a great financial investor, a manager of our portfolio in Morgan Stanley, and we meet with them on a monthly basis. Now, when people say, because I read your comments on the Independent all the time, when people talk about how we should be making more money because we are in the bull market and we need to be making like 30% gains. At the end of the day, we have a portfolio that is more conservative to moderate. We don't want to be aggressive because
You don't want to risk having a tank.
well, if you risk that, these are people's lives who put 20, 30 years into the job. And decisions that we take very seriously. How we want to make sure they have a decent pension once they retire from their service. And so our overall goal annually is to get 7.25%.
What have we been getting?
We actually hit it close around to 7.25
Mm-hmm.
on an annual basis. It's growing slowly but surely, but this takes like 30, 40 years.
But then the issue is we need to put money into the city has to put its own contribution.
We have to figure out a way to generate revenue. And I want to commend our mayor for trying that. If you look at what she did for trying to control Union Station, that really didn't work out. We're looking at trying to expand the New Haven Tweed Airport. You're having complaints from the residents living in that area, and rightfully so. You look at the casino from Bridgeport, but having a job center in New Haven. You're looking at Bridgehaven. You look at trying to bring Amazon. Even her trip to China. I know that she got a lot of flack from that, but she was trying to.
I felt that was unfair. I thought that you go to see how things work in other places. She got ideas about transit and housing, and she was connecting with people who might bring jobs here.
And you look at $37,000 trying to bring close to $1 million, $2 million back to the city. But I'm not, for lack of, she is trying to generate revenue for this city. But unfortunately, you have a shrinking tax base. And I believe that 25% of New Haven, residents contribute 25% to the overall revenue for the city. 75% comes from the state grants, federal, what have you. But you have 25%. And for us, there's no way you could really, it's hard to run a city, difficult to run a city when you have residents only contributing 25% of our overall
And
revenue.
you can tax only 54% of the property because it's
I,
tax
I
exempt.
think it's less. I think it may be close to 46, 48% now.
So some people think you might have to restructure government and make massive cuts. We have a $30 million structural deficit. Any thoughts on that, Reverend Cousin? That it's not just finding new revenues.
I feel it as a person who pays car tax. I just got to go right down to City Hall after this interview to pay my car tax for this year. As a person who pays property taxes in the city, that always brings concern about, you ask yourself, can you afford to live here? I believe that the FRAC report talks about how New Haven residents need to actually pay up to 20% increase in property taxes.
Well, they said that they didn't say you should charge them. I said that's what it would have taken to truly balance this new budget.
And see, even when you look at that, are we even paying our share to actually keep the city running? So I think you really have to have an honest assessment with how we do government, what we actually pay. And until we really to have that conversation, we're always going to, as far as lack of a better phrase, kick the can down the road.
Mm-hmm. And what did you think of the spat that's taking place now, where the board of alders approved the budget, but after it was approved, they said we don't like the fact that the mayor gave a bunch of raises to people that hadn't had raises much years, waited till after the budget was passed. The money was in the budget, but it was an unidentified line that they didn't realize that's what it was for. Over 2 years, it added up to $483,000. So what they've done is they have a bill to remove that amount of money from the departments where the bosses get their raises. Our administration says you can't do that legally. Once you vote for a budget, you can't make those kind of changes. There's been a disagreement on that. It adds up to a total of $10 in tax relief to the average citizen if it goes through. Any thoughts about that?
Let me try to give you my answer. Let me try to explain my position. When you look at that particular situation, with the board of orders actually approving the budget, and given our financial crisis that we have in our city, no matter, it's not optic wise, it's not good to give anybody raises during a time of facing a potential deficit. It never looks good. On the flip side of that, you have these workers who never received raises in over 5 years, that you could potentially lose them.
It's also a pay cut if you don't get a raise because cost of living.
Well, from my perspective, this reality for me, I had, I believe, a tremendous assistant at my church, who, was really did a lot for the church, a lot for the community. And she talked about receiving a raise and what can we do to make it happen. And I couldn't pull the trigger because it just didn't look right during the time, because we just didn't have the money to do it. And so I end up losing her. She has a very great job now working for Planned Parenthood, but I lost her due to I cannot meet, her demands. But as far as the board of alders are concerned, they try to do what's best to protect our residents in our city. I spoke with a few. The one thing that, I think I'm a little bit uneasy about is the fact that you did approve the 11% tax increase. Nobody thought that would go through. And now you're trying to find ways to walk it back in terms of these resolutions, these bills, what have you. And I don't want to get, killed on this, but you're looking at trying to save $10. Where property taxes, I know my property tax is going to go by $600. And now you're trying to save me $10. I understand every little bit helps, but is it really worth this battle?
I would pay $10 easy for people to get raises. I would have rather it were publicly discussed before the vote. Or the reason it built up so long is that one of the reasons is that we give non-union officials and department heads raises in conjunction with when raises are given to a union known as AFSCME 3144, Professional Union Supervisors. And for a bunch of years, they didn't have a contract, so they didn't get raises, and those people didn't get raises. And And then when they finally got a contract and got retroactive raises, that's when they did it with these folks. So it was very well intentioned that that system was set up that way.
Mm-hmm.
You're not trying to give the bosses any more of a pay increase than you're giving the rank and file. But I do think in retrospect, Sunday morning quarterback,
Mm-hmm.
Monday morning quarterback,
Monday, about the water cooler.
yeah, that you could look back and say you should have just done it year by year. Give them the
You
1%.
you could have, but as once again, when is ever a good time to do raises?
Right.
Every time, I mean, look at what happened when the mayor wanted a $10,000 increase,
Yeah.
and look how much flack she caught from that. Eventually, she got it. But
She
anytime
got part of it. She didn't get the whole thing.
but even
And then they set in a process in place where it gradually go up every 18 months, I think it was, with the cost of living.
and that's the thing. Anytime
good
you talk
solution.
about somebody receiving an increase, you're going to actually receive that type of flack or that type of criticism.
Let me ask you, as a minister, one thing that's been on my mind is people who are wonderful people, big hearts, help people in their community. When they're wearing their taxpayer hat, they get very angry and they feel cheated, and they resent other people getting a cost of living raise. Why do you think that happens?
Well, at the end of the day, as a taxpayer, I think that nobody likes paying taxes to begin with. If you try to avoid it as best you can, and it's paying your full share, so to speak. So anytime you see somebody get a cost of living raise, they look at it and said, "I didn't receive that. Why am I paying money for somebody else to get a cost
Most
of
people
living?"
do.
Hmm?
Most people do, don't they?
No,
You don't get cost of living raise?
no.
People aren't getting raises anymore?
Eh, I received one 5 years. I received one.
We have them every year at the Independent. They're not big. They're $2,000 a year, but we do give
And
a raise.
my wife, she works at Quinnipiac. She received some. She received, I think, like a 2% increase. But for some professions, there is no cost of living raises, as far as I'm concerned.
But there
Uh,
should be.
It should be, yes, because inflation always goes up,
Yeah.
but we never really take that into account. So we look at cost of living. I don't mind paying it because I understand that everything goes up a little bit more each and every year. But there are those who feel that I'm paying more in gas, I'm paying more in food, and now you said I gotta pay more for somebody else to have a cost of living raise when I'm not seeing any more money going into my paycheck. I
So
think
that would
that's where the
explain it,
battle
yeah.
goes in.
I'm worried about our collective soul. I'm worried about the rancor in our public discussions of difficult issues, not just in New Haven, I mean in the country, in the
Well,
world. I think it's taking us to a dark place.
well, right now, um, as much as technology brought us together, it also divided us. And there was a time where you didn't really say what you felt because you felt that your 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 opinion was not of the norm. Now you see through Facebook, social media platforms that there are others who think like you. And now it's actually empowering you to keep thinking how you're feeling. And I think right now we live in such an individualistic society where I got mine, you better get yours. And you better work harder. You better actually do the best you can, but I'm not going to help you. And as long as we got that mentality stuck in our minds, we're never going to progress as a country. It's only when we come together. It shouldn't be about ego. It shouldn't be about pride. But at the end of the day, what are your decisions going to affect the community as a whole? I look at it as one big family. You know, my children,
Sometimes family says the meanest stuff to each other.
yeah, but my family, it's not about me anymore. It's about my wife and it's about my children. And what I do impacts them. And also in my position, with the various hats that I serve within the community, if I don't do it, who is going to do it?
Hmm.
Who's going to take care of them? Those who feel they can't get the seat at the table, those who feel that they don't have a voice, or those who feel that they don't have any power, who is going to be their advocate? And who is going to let them know that they can stand up, they can rise? And I think that's what our position should be. That at the end of the day, what affects me directly may affect you indirectly. And what impacts one impacts us all. until we really understand that the decisions that we make, how we live our lives, it affects everybody, not just ones that you know, but those who you may never even meet. If you don't take that into consideration, I believe that we could be lost as a nation.
Amen. All right, we got just a couple minutes left. Reverend Tom Ficklin's joined us. Thanks for listening, Tom. So I know that you have a keen interest in politics. You worked for, was it Senator Blumenthal back in the day?
Congressman John Larson
John
on my
Larson.
senior year of college.
That's right. You had to make a decision. We talked about this on a previous episode. You made a decision
Yes.
between politics and the clergy. Calmy Kels is on. Thank you for listening. Sorry if I butchered your name. I hope I didn't. Any thoughts? There's a big, busy election year for there's open races for governor, lieutenant governor. The attorney general's position is open, treasurer. Any thoughts on those races? Are you excited about any of them, or do you see your congregants
There
paying
were
attention?
two that I'm very excited about. I have a strong interest in. That's lieutenant governor and attorney general. I do believe those two positions are going to make or break the overall ticket and really the overall state. So I put a lot of emphasis on those two positions. Those are the races that I'm watching.
Not governor.
You
You're not
know,
excited. No, I haven't met a person who's excited about the governor's race.
you're not going to have like
Inspired.
you're not going to have like a Barack Obama, that's going to just like make people run to the polls.
Can we at least get an El Grasso? Kevin Lembo?
That's the thing. When you look at these candidates, I believe that both of them are qualified within their own right. We look at, especially, I haven't really been following the Republican race as closely as I have the
I was asking you a
Democrats.
little closer to the mic.
I haven't been watching the races closely between the Democratic Party as opposed to the Republican Party. I do know that Mark Boughton from Danbury is running. I do know that with Ganem and Lamont, they were just over at Varick having a forum, and then they were at the Schubert Theater a few weeks ago having their debate. So you're watching those two, but I'm really interested to know what policies are they going to bring to the table. The one thing that concerns me, especially from the African American community, is that I believe that they just have one message for us, and that talks about crime and prison reform. And we don't hear nothing about education. We don't hear anything about the economy. We don't hear anything.
You think you're pigeonholed? Like I'm going to a black church, time to talk about crime?
I strongly believe that we are, because I've heard speeches, in my church that I know for a fact they won't give out in Branford or Guilford. So why is it that you feel that when you come to predominantly African American community?
That's a good point. And they do always come to your church. Bethel's a must visit. So tell me about the lieutenant governor's race. What's interesting you about that?
I actually was able to serve as a proxy for the Democratic Convention. And
what does that mean, a proxy?
I was able to pitch it for a person who couldn't make it, who was a delegate for the even delegation, and I was able to substitute for them and actually.
You must have been having fun, given how much you like politics.
Well, I had a great time, and I even brought my 4-year-old son with me.
Excellent.
And he stayed the entire time. We actually enjoyed it. What I loved about the lieutenant governor's race is that you talked about the lack of diversity within the party. And out of 1,900 delegates, you had a young woman who really just started running for lieutenant governor days prior to the convention.
Eva Bermuda Zimmerman.
Yes, pick up over 700 votes.
Yeah, 40% she got.
That's amazing to me. For a person to actually attract that much attention in such a short span of time.
And there was a lot of disappointment among people in New Haven, not just African Americans and Latinos, about the choice of a white woman, Susan Beiswitz, on the ticket to run with Led Lamont or Ganem, who are white. Some people said a few years back that would have been diversity. We want women. There are a lot of women running nationally. But now you got her against a woman of color. Is that basically what that's about, or is there more to it?
I think there's more to it. I think that what politics is about relationships. And I've known Eva when I first came here. And how did I know her? My church, we actually did an affordable care enrollment fair.
Okay, and she got a state award from the legislature for signing up people for Affordable Care Act.
We partnered with her.
Okay.
And I've known her then. I see her passion for those who
She
don't
does have
have
passion. She also says it's generational. She's 31, and
30,
that she feels that
31.
it's
We
time
share the
for
same
baby boomers to
birthday.
sit back.
You know,
You're 31 too.
I'm 35, but
Okay.
I actually will allow to share my birthday with her. But I see people where they are, and so I've seen her work. I've seen her commitment to the community, especially communities of color, which I greatly admire. And I don't know too much about Susan Bisowitz. I know that she had a strong support system leading up to the convention, and then a week later, drop out
Oh, for
um,
governor, right?
for governor to actually run for lieutenant governor, and that actually had a lot of people thinking like, okay, what happened? At least see it through the convention. So why not actually see how it plays out first before you make your decision to run for lieutenant governor? And I think that's where a lot of people are just still questioning as to why would Lamont, smart for him
I
because
don't think it was smart from in the end.
well
People were mad at him.
Susan was his biggest competitor at the time, and so okay,
She wasn't picking up the steam. She didn't even qualify, I believe, for public financing, did she?
I think she did.
She did.
I'm not sure. I
I
think
thought
so.
she was having trouble getting that money. Yeah.
Well, raising money this time. But I think for Lamont to choose her, smart for him, try to, forego a primary, but
Mhm.
it did hurt his supporters in saying you should have chose somebody else. And so that's how I'm looking at this race in terms of if the Lieutenant Governor Eva does become the candidate, or is that governor who's going to be one out the primary between Ganem and Lamont? Are they going to be willing to run with her and support her? And that's what I'm interested in.
I think she's our Alexandria Ocasio Cortez.
Well, I tell you, I think for Connecticut, especially for Democrats, we need a reason to actually go out and vote. We need that motivation. We need that fire. Who's going to inspire us to go to the polls? And me personally, I believe Eva can do that. But if it's anybody else, if how the ticket's lining up, who's going to be that one person that's going to say we need to make sure we vote for this ticket? That's how I look at it.
All right. Well, I love hearing how you look at it. Look at about everything. It's so great to have you on, Reverend Stephen Cousin of Bethel AME Church, one of the great congregations in New Haven on Gough Street.
Well, thank you, Paul. And I keep saying, keep doing what you're doing. And as at the end of the day, I always come to read your comments.
Thank you.
Because if somebody could tell me who 3/5 is.
Oh, 3/5 is actually 3/5.
Really?
His name's Terrence, but he goes by 3/5 for a long time. You can see him at Edge of the Woods on Sundays. And he actually sounds in person exactly like his comments. He's been an activist in New Haven for at least 30 years.
I love that person.
So do I.
Thank you for actually clearing that up for me. Now I can retire.
He doesn't hide, that guy. He's great.
I love it. Thank you so much for having me again. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Reverend Cousin. It's a real honor. And thanks to Yale New Haven Hospital for providing support for today's program. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD A Plea for Peace. Now, we know what it's like to be free. We just got to remember to book our flight. Fly free with us all day and all night long here at WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.